And it seems to me that the biggest story here that isn't reported, because people don't like to frame anything positively for President Trump, when they say, hey, he walked away from that summit with nothing. And I say, it's easy to argue, well, he got a commitment to do this or a commitment to do that. But realistically, all of the commitments they made, the commitments we made, are easily reversible. So it's not really about that. What the president did, and Chairman Kim did, and I give him credit as well, is that they have redefined the situation from two mortal enemies, one who must win and the other one must lose, to two potential friends who have taken the first few steps that are not really representative of the whole journey, but they're on the right path to friendship, something where we win, they win, and frankly, they win a lot bigger than we win if this plays out right. So the whole reframing from enemies to probably friends who can help each other is what the president walked away with, and it's completely ignored.
Well, I appreciate Scott Adams coming on short notice, creator of Dilbert, you name it. Really, life coach is what he segued into, and very, very popular online doing that. And, of course, he's been at the center of the whole Kanye West awakening process and made the point a few months ago that Kanye had blown a hole in reality. So I guess that reality could then start pouring in. He talked about how it's a lie that history repeats. It's something politicians, people use against us. It doesn't have to repeat if we don't want it to. And now I was watching the little 2-minute video that Trump showed Kim Jong-un that, as Scott Adams pointed out a few days ago, Owen, could be the best negotiating strategy ever. And it's certainly new, and it certainly worked so far. But I'm watching, I'm like, oh, that's Scott Adams word for word. This is what he said in his last video about Kanye. Somebody must be watching. And then, sure enough, Scott Adams put a video out pointing out, not taking credit for it, but pointing out those parallels. And so I'm just wondering with Scott Adams, obviously he and Trump are going to the same fount of knowledge. And I know there was this pastor that was real famous that was a positive thinker, positive speaker, that helped motivate Trump to a great extent. But just the positivity coming back in the world is even making me a lot happier of a person, because I tend to get negative sometimes too about the bad things in the world instead of getting positive about the good things. But then I start seeing all these great things happening. But while I was on vacation, I ran into Democrats who get in my face, 3 of them did. And I'd say, what about the peace deal? Isn't it great? What about the economy? And they'd just say, shut up, racist. And I said, that's not reality, and that's not true. And so it just gets crazier and crazier and crazier that we have big polls out. It's on Infowars.com, Paul Joseph Watson article, TV poll, 71% of liberals don't want peace with North Korea because Trump would take credit. They're having national TV polls with Michelle Wolf's Netflix show, and 71% don't want peace and admit it's because they don't like Trump. This is like a death cult of negative people that would rather die in nuclear war. Scott Adams, you're really good at putting your finger on the major pulse of the good things and the bad things. But if Kanye blew a hole in reality, which I agree, and now that breach has turned into a huge gaping maw, where are we historically right now? And thanks for joining us.
Well, I call it the beginning of the golden age. I've been defining the golden age as that moment when people start realizing that the remaining big problems are no longer physical. A physical problem would be you run out of food, you run out of resources. And we're not in that situation. We're more in a situation where North Korea is a perfect example. We were worried about what they were thinking, and they were worried about what we were thinking. But neither of us had any reason to be at war or to start a war or to continue bad feelings. So by both Chairman Kim, who said it first, by the way, he said in his first statement at the summit, he said words to the effect of, let's leave the past behind. And then you saw President Trump with his video that's getting a lot of attention saying exactly the same thing. Because if you dwell in the past, you're stuck with, we can't move forward because you did this that one time, or some relative of yours did something one time, or our side did something that one time. You just can't move forward. And it seems to me that the biggest story here that isn't reported, because people don't like to frame anything positively for President Trump, when they say, hey, he walked away from that summit with nothing. And I say, it's easy to argue, well, he got a commitment to do this or a commitment to do that. But realistically, all of the commitments they made, the commitments we made, are easily reversible. So it's not really about that. What the president did, and Chairman Kim did, and I give him credit as well, is that they have redefined the situation from two moral enemies, one who must win and the other one must lose, to two potential friends who have taken the first few steps that are not really representative of the whole journey, but they're on the right path to friendship, something where we win, they win, and frankly, they win a lot bigger than we win if this plays out right. So the whole reframing from enemies to probably friends who can help each other is what the president walked away with, and it's completely ignored. And when he's statement that we're essentially safer from nuclear war now, and his critics said, "What? That's crazy." And I say, who has a nuclear war with their ally? Who bombs somebody who has just offered to help rebuild your country? Who becomes an enemy with somebody who's got their hand out literally and figuratively? It's the sort of thing that just doesn't really happen. So he reframed the situation in a way that effectively made a nuclear war no longer have a purpose. Who bombs their friends? It just doesn't happen. And as long as we're on that path, even tentatively, even for steps, and everybody would agree that much more would need to be done to make it real. But as long as you're on the path to mutual benefit, nobody fights. Nobody. It just doesn't happen. And that, I think, is the biggest unreported story.
Scott, I went back a few days ago and I watched your little 20-minute viral video, or however long it was, on Kanye blowing a hole in reality. And then I went back and watched your new video. But before I watched that one, I wanted to go watch the old one. And I don't want to say Trump's plagiarizing you. He's not. But it's word for word about unlimited resources. We've transcended resources. We can flip the script. We can take control of our destiny. History doesn't have to repeat, but we're the people in the critical time to do it. I mean, seeing that, I mean, you guys are on the same page. So maybe for listeners that want to learn more about the antecedents to your political and your philosophy in life, what would they want to research?
Well, my book "Win Bigly" has a good introduction to that sort of stuff. But as you mentioned before, the influential pastor Norman Vincent Peale was the person who really was the father, if you will, of the idea of power of positive thinking. That was his best-selling book, and he was Trump's pastor when Trump was a kid, and he was influential to me as well. I read his books, so I think we all got a little bit infected by the strategy of being positive and framing things in the positive way for win-win situations. So it probably shouldn't be a big surprise that people who had the same influences have arrived at the same way of
sure, but a couple of years ago, when you did the whole mental judo where you said, "Oh, I'm supporting Hillary or I'll be basically murdered," you were saying, "I believe Trump is following this. I believe he'll be successful," and I think it's because you understood his mindset that you have, better than anybody, I think, charted what he would do.
Yeah, and the other thing he does well that he doesn't get credit for is a sense of priorities. If you look at the criticisms of him, and you were to make a list of all the things people say, and then make a list of the things he's actually doing that are real things, like the economy, North Korea, progress with beating ISIS, et cetera, those are all real things and are top priorities. The things people are arguing about are, well, he didn't pass the fact checking on this according to us. It tends to be a little subject what the facts are in many cases.
Exactly. They're still playing the game like they're God and they dictate reality.
Yeah. So, and the president has put, winning and making America great again, having a strong economy, all those things very expressly at the top of his priority list. And when he uses persuasion to get there, the critics are arguing the least important parts of what he said. They're arguing about the wording. They're arguing about the technical accuracy. They're arguing about whether in some way that we can't imagine things will be worse in the future because we allowed this to happen.
But what matters
today.
is it's really working. So I want to ask Scott Adams, a real visionary, what's coming next straight ahead. And I want to talk about the negativity, though, as people get more positive and we realize that, you know, humanity's in a pretty good position if we behave like it. Well, what is the negative side going to do? Because they don't seem to be getting better. They seem to be getting just insane and just making up their own false reality while pointing their finger at us and saying we're the ones lying. We'll be back.